guys, thanks for coming back to the channel. I've had a few of you viewers reach out to me directly asking me some questions, and I love that. Gets a chance to actually talk with you guys or talk with you guys one-on-one and try to answer some of your questions that you have about these beautiful old Lionels. I've been getting a lot of questions lately about this particular motor. So both of these are out of a Lionel Scout. This one is out of an 1120, and I believe the 1110 used this same motor. This one is out of a 1050 and 1060 style. That is the one that is the plastic shell, not the die-cast metal. And the question that's been coming through a lot is, how do I get these nuts out? Because unlike mine, normally these are all blackened. And it does kind of look like they're molded onto the cover, but they're not. So all you have to do to get them off is just get a socket or a wrench on them, and there's enough to grab and just twist them off. And you'll see when they're out how fine or how thin of a side profile that head actually has. Point is, it's just a bolt, just a very flat-headed bolt. Just back these both off that way, and then you can lift this cover off. And underneath this cover, it's very basic. It's just the brush holders. Just like that. There's the brush holders. There's the brushes themselves. The motors on the 1060 and 1050, they're very, very, very basic. They have no directional control whatsoever, so it's not that the little tab sticking out of this is missing. It was never there. They only went forward. They did not have a reverse. So this motor, although it has the exact same shell as the other one, the guts are a little bit different due to the fact that, again, it has no directional control. It does, however, have a light. And the 1120, and I believe the 1110 also, do not have lights in them. So those are some big differences between these two motors, even though they share the same molded shell. And one other thing, when you tighten these bolts back on, this plastic cover can get very brittle over time because of the heat and the cold and the use and whatnot. Just be careful when you're tightening it up not to over tighten it, because you don't want to have to replace this thing. As you can see, there's already a chip taken out of this one. Also, for those guys that don't know, this here is your oil wick. So the intention is to drop some oil onto this little piece of fabric, and it travels down the fabric into the motor and lubricates it. And you're all good. Now, the reason I'm not going to completely take this one apart is I know it works absolutely fine. But the bigger thing is getting these wheels off. This is a plastic case. It's held together by these two clips. There's one, and there's one at the back. But to get the motor completely apart, you actually have to pry off the wheels, and then the halves will come apart. Now, with this being plastic, if you don't have a proper wheel puller and you want to do the screwdriver trick with one screwdriver on this side and one on the other, and then giving them a twist, there is a huge chance that you are going to crack this casing. So if you do have to do that kind of maintenance on it, I suggest getting yourself a wheel puller of some sort to do it, because the likelihood of you cracking this is pretty good, and at that point, it's just junk. So that is the 1060 motor, not molded nuts on it, actual bolts sticking out of there. And let's go over to this motor now. This is out of, like I said, out of the 1120 and the 1110. This one does have a directional control, but it does not have a light. You can use the parts that activate the light from this one in here, if you wanted to pull this one apart and do that, or if you had the spare bits, because I think it's just the addition of a brass strip in here is what it is. That, so you can see it's got part of the socket in there. It has one of the contacts, but it doesn't have a second contact in there. But that's easy enough to fix if you wanted it. But right now, what we're going to do is we're just going to take this apart, do a general maintenance on it just to show you guys how. And the reason I am on this one as opposed to this one is I have had to take this motor apart several times because it's not really reliable and it does take a lot of maintenance to keep it going. And by removing it a lot, these wheels, I can just pull them off by hand. I don't have to pry them, so I won't crack this casing. This one, the motor's still good. Everything's tight. I'll probably sell this at a swap meet, so I don't want to wreck it now. That being said, let's get this apart. Underneath here, you have two sprockets, one on this side, one on this side, and there are two contact fingers, one up here and one down here. When you remove this plate, you have to be careful that those fingers don't spring out because they are a bit like a brass spring piece. So what we do, just remove the screws that hold the cover down. And again, just like the other one, when you tighten everything back up, you don't want to put too much pressure on it because you don't want to crack this plate. So here we go. Two screws out. We lift up the cover and there we see the components. So here is one set of the brass contacts. And here is the second one. So right now we're going to carefully pull those out so they don't come flying out, just like that. I'm trying to avoid that, but now you can see what'll happen. And now we want to take out the gears and the brushes, and we can start now cleaning things up and putting it all back together. So these plastic sprockets have these little brass contact pieces. Just check to make sure that they're clean, free of dirt, no buildups or anything on them. It's also the brush holder too, so you want to make sure stuff is clean in there, and it already is. Give the second one a look. Not a problem. Everything looks good. So we can reinstall these. They have to go in a specific order, in a specific way, or this motor will not work. So, as you can see on these two sprockets, this one, the teeth are a little bit pointed. This one, the teeth are squared off. You want the pointed teeth on this side and the square teeth on this side. And one thing that will help you know which side is which is we're going to flip the directional control, and you see that little brass piece come down. Just came into view. So there it is retracted. There it is extended. The sprocket with the pointy teeth goes on to the side where that directional control is, because that will actually lock into these teeth, and that is what somehow reverses this train. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but that's what it does. So we're going to insert the brush into the bottom of this, and we're going to drop this in. Actually, and one more thing before we get too carried away. Let's get that brush out. So we know the pointy teeth sprocket goes on the side with the directional control. The squared off one goes on the other side. When these are lined up in the body, you want one of the sides brass contacts to line up with a blank plastic area on the other. So you want it to look like this. You don't want it to look like this, and you don't want it to look like that. They have to be offset from each other. So this is the setup you're looking for. If it's not lined up this way, the motor will not work. So, that having been said, Let's insert the brushes in here. And as you can see, I pulled the little direction control out of the way to drop this sprocket in. I get the second one in. Make sure we have the brass contact lined up with a blank plastic space, as I'd said earlier. And now I'm going to bring down that brass tab, as you can see, and lock this into place. Now it's locked in. It's not locked in that these sprockets won't drop out if I turn this upside down. It's just holding it in the position that it's supposed to be in. Next, we want to put in our fingers, our little contact fingers. And as you can see, this has a little brass tab sticking out of it. So we want that brass tab to face into the motor. And then on the motor itself, on this little plate, you can see it has a raised tab. We want that to fit into the square hole on this contact finger. Get it kind of lined up. Then I get my screwdriver and just kind of guide it back down into position. And you'll feel it kind of pop. This one popped out. We don't want that. There. Lined up. And there it is. That's into position. The one on the opposite side goes in the exact same way. That little tab faces inwards. Spread the fingers open a little bit and just kind of lightly push it into position. Then I just get my screwdriver and just kind of guide it the rest of the way over. Just like that. And there, that's it. This is all set into place and ready to go. So now I'm going to put the cover back on. And for the third and final time, you don't want to over tighten these screws because you don't want to crack this cover, which has gotten pretty brittle over the years. So that's it. Like I've said before, especially in the little more in-depth video I did about this motor, that most of the problems come from with that little directional tab coming out of alignment from that sprocket, and it does quite a bit. This motor here actually came out of this 1120. This is the original motor for this. What's in here right now is the motor out of an 1130. It mounted up the exact same way, even though it is a steel-framed motor as opposed to the molded plastic one. The 1130 also has an E unit in it, which this one doesn't. And the best part of the whole deal is the 1130's motor is considerably stronger than the 1120's original motor. Stronger and way more reliable, which is why I swapped them out. This thing, I was taking it apart, at least once or twice per run. It drove me crazy. That little directional control in there, it causes a lot of problems. This motor is not reliable. It's not weak. If you have the opportunity to find yourself, if you really like the Scout that much, that you want to run it that much, find yourself the motor from an 1130 or a 2034, I believe will also work, and just drop it in, and it's going to save yourself a lot of troubles. But again, for the sake of this video, let's assume that you don't have that option and you need to use the original motor. So what we're going to do now is we've taken care of this side, is we're going to open this up and just kind of show you guys inside what's going on. I've had this apart so many times. These wheels are not going to be a problem coming off. I'm not worried about cracking the shell here. So I'm going to get my screwdriver in here and just give it a light twist. There's one. There's two. So, with those out of the way, I can actually now show you the Magnetraction. This is the Magnetraction for the 1120. It is just a magnet. And you can put it in this side, or you can drop it into this side as well if you want. Doesn't matter. Only comes with one. Maybe if you've got a spare, you can put both of them in and have double Magnetraction if you'd like. Again, I would just swap out the motor. So we've got the wheels out of the way. We pull the clip off of each end. That's 1 and 2, and they just slide off. And then you can lift these halves apart. Before you do, I suggest that you put the sprocket side down, facing down, and lift this section off. And I'll show you why as soon as we get it off. So, here we go. There's the pickup rollers. We'll just get those out of the way. The reason that I face it on the bench this way and lift off this half is all because of all of this stuff here. This spring, this little brass finger, and these parts here. So this little brass finger, this is that directional control that you saw on the other side. So this thing, when you flip the switch, it does something with this piece and knocks this finger up and down, and that changes the direction of the train. When this whole thing comes apart, when that spring pops off and this falls out, it is not easy to line them back up to get them in. So you rarely will have to take this side off on these motors, I find. I mean, unless it's really trashed and really dirty. This one's not. You can see the armature is nice and clean still, so we're good there. Like I said, you don't really have to take this side off that much, and I would avoid it at all costs, just because when this stuff all comes apart, it is not easy to get back in, and I've already done it in another video, which I'm going to post a link to up in the corner there, so I'm not going to have to do it this time. But what I am going to do is I will drop the Magnetraction first back into place here. Just sits in there like that. Oh, and here, this one does have a complete system for the lighting. I forgot I installed this in. So normally, this little piece here, they don't have it. Most of the 1120s and 1110s, well, none of them have it. They will have this little top brass piece, but not this one. So this one, I have installed the second bit in, so it could actually run with a light. But, anyways, back to it. Here's your pickup rollers, and your pickup rollers are just held in by the tension of this little brass plate. That's just like that. So they just sit on these little plastic pegs, molded onto the shell, held down by the spring tension of this contact plate, and that's it. So when you're putting this thing back together now, the hardest thing to line up is this brass part needs to slide into this little receptacle here. And it is concave, so it does kind of help itself guide in, but it still can be a little bit tricky. The other thing that you want to have ready to go is the switch itself. So what I end up doing with this, because it just doesn't really hold into place that well, unless you do this little trick that I always do. I put a little bit of Vaseline on it to make it a little bit tacky, so I can just set this on and it will hold just long enough for me to mess around with this and get everything lined up and get the two halves together. So that's what we're going to do right now. Like I said, it takes a little bit of playing around to get it dropped in properly. And it's all because of that one brass finger. And there's no real super easy way to line it all up. You don't want to push this around too much or this whole thing will pop out. So I just kind of want to get it into a different... I just want to line it up a little bit better. Oh, and I don't have my switch in. It fell out. Always remember, this thing has to be there. And let's try this again. Okay. So that's all back together. We have our Magnetraction in still. That's all good. Let's drop the wheels on. So gear side to the gear side. Something's in the way there. There we go. To make sure it's quartered. So this is all back together now. I'm going to set up a quick test track. We'll just throw this on to make sure it did all go back together, and then I will just put this back in my parts box. Oh, hey, yeah, I got to put the clips on. I'm glad you reminded me. Thanks for pointing that out. All right, now I'll get a test track, and we'll throw this one on. All right, so we got our test track set up. We got our transformer all set up, so we're going to put this motor on. See what we get. We have forward. And we have reverse. Works like a bad charm. So that's it. That's a basic maintenance on this style of Scout motor, 1110, 1120, and maybe some others in there. And then we have the one direction only 1050, 1060 style motor. And we'll just put this one on just because. And this is its directional control. There you go. There's change in direction. See it again. Change in direction. Away you go. And we'll drop a light in this one. Got a spare bulb here. Just to check and make sure that part worked. Yep. So we got a bit of a light there. Good to go. This one, it looked like it had it all there. Let's double check and see if it actually does light up. Yep. That is those two motors. Like I said, original question. Thank you guys for writing in and asking about that. This is not a molded piece. You can remove that. It is all fine. For those of you that want to stick with the original motor, there's a quick little disassembly and reassembly of it. Like I said, I've had the other video that goes a little bit more in depth of a complete breakdown. Once again, I'll have that link up there. But if you really want your 1120 to go and you have the option to, you can swap out the motor from an 1130 into it, or just get an 1130 instead. It's the same train. It looks exactly the same as the 1120. The 2034 is also another one. But it has its own E-unit, and it operates much better. So there we have it, guys. Thanks again for writing in about the questions about these motors here. I love hearing from you guys and helping out a little bit more directly whenever I can. And keep those questions coming in. Keep the comments coming in. Also, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button for the channel. All of that support is greatly appreciated, and it helps so much. So, guys, thanks again, and we will see you on the next video. Ciao for now.